you should follow before you start assembling a computer. Assembling a computer means definitely you need a computer case in different parts, all the parts, motherboard and hard drive, uh, adapter cards, memory, etc., heat sinks, right? So we talk about the power supply type, what consideration you have to take when you're selecting a power. So power supply must be able to provide the power supply wattage must be good enough to provide power to all system devices, including motherboard and peripheral devices. Case type, we talk about that case type should be compatible with the motherboard size and power supply size. So form factors you have to consider which are compatible with motherboard and power supply and case of the system. So you place the power supply in one of the in the bay area. So there is a specific space given in the case which is reserved for the power supply to fit in, and you tie the screws uh, correctly. So you use a cable to tie the screw, all the cables. So those cables, when you're working with, so you better tie them up. So you shouldn't include it in your work area while you are fixing other parts. Um, Now, question is, you set up a case, you got a case, and you have set up your power supply there. This is the first thing you do, right? You go step by step. First thing is you place the power supply. Second is motherboard, right? So, what kind of motherboards you're looking for? You have to first select the proper motherboard. Selecting a motherboard means where you're going to use it. Applications is important. When you buy a computer, so consider where you're going to use it, right? What is the major use of that computer? Is it for general purpose or home use or some video games or video audio applications, right? So consider applications where you're going to use and then select the motherboard, CPU size, socket types, and capabilities of the chipset, expansion slots, I/O ports, and built-in ports, right? So you have to consider all those parameters when you are selecting a motherboard. So what is the point of selecting a motherboard? Either you are building a new PC, right, from scratch, or you are replacing the existing system, existing computer motherboard, right? So when selecting a replacement motherboard, make sure that it supports or accommodate the CPU and RAM, because you're replacing only motherboard, right? Not everything, right? So not the memory, not the CPU, because it costs differently, it costs separately. So when you're replacing, let's suppose you have this kind of motherboard and you're replacing it with this one, right? So what you have to consider? So you have to consider that the memory you have it there is compatible with the memory you're going to install in the new motherboard, and the CPU also compatible with the older motherboard. Okay, and the cards and peripheral devices all are compatible. So the existing heat sink and fan assembly when reusing the CPU. So if you're using the same heat assembly, heat as a fan and heat assembly. This is what we call fan and heat assembly. This is also you're going to place them in the new one, right? On the new motherboard, so it should be compatible with. Okay, so another thing you have to consider when you are selecting CPU motherboard or replacing a motherboard, what kind of socket is there for CPU on motherboard? Remember, I told you about the socket type, I think in this week earlier. There are two type of socket, LGA kind and PGA mostly used. And there is also the third one, the BGA. The LGA is land grid array. How does it differ from the, this is LGA kind and this is PGA kind. So this is the most common type of the CPU used today in Intel system. Um, uh, so what is, how does it differs from? So you, when you, this is the socket, right? This is the socket assembly. Socket assembly means it doesn't have CPU. It's just a frame, right? A placeholder, right? So placeholder where you're going to place your CPU. So pins are on the, are in the sockets. So those are the pins which are aligned on the socket, and receptacles on the CPU. Those are the receptacles. So pins in sockets must be compatible with each other, right? So it allows for higher pin density if we are using the LGA kind of the CPU socket. So it inserted into the zero insertion force or ZIF socket. So that's a terminology we used commonly where, with different type of sockets we have on motherboard, including the CPU socket. ZIF means you don't have to push too hard to place to have it connected with the to have the CPU connected with the socket, right? Because it requires a slight push or zero insertion force to have to reset on the, or to reseat on the CPU frame. Pin grid array or PGA kind pins, in this case, you would see the difference here. The pins are not there, pins on the CPU socket, right? So here the pins are on the CPU itself. This is the CPU. This is also CPU. This is socket LGA kind. This is PGA kind. So different is pins are on the CPU, right? So less pin density and receptacles, or you can think like holes where those pins going to be inserted. Those are in the socket. So that's a different kind of the a socket which is used, some other type of the AMD kind of the system or motherboard. So Bell grid array or BGAs, in this case, we don't have the separate CPU in socket assembly. CPU is soldered to the motherboard and usually found in laptop, phones, and tablet systems where this motherboard is area is smaller. So here are some of the example commonly used architecture in Intel sockets. So LGA 775, LGA 1155, and so on. So here you can see a little bit, a small list. That is basically, this number is basically indicates the number of grids on CPU, right? So 775 means there are 775 grids places on the CPU. Similarly, for AMD kind, AMD commonly use PGA kind, right? So socket names AM3 and AM3 plus and FM1, those are the socket names. This is how the AMD name their sockets for different configuration. So you must consider selecting CPU, socket, speed, compatibility. Uh, okay, so DRAM and SRAM I explained earlier. Have question about it?
No, ma'am.
So you remember the difference between DRAM and SRAM? So DRAM is in on motherboard, right? This is on motherboard. That's a main memory. In SRAM is a cache memory, right? Because it's expensive and fast. Uh, Both are the random access memory, but the fabrication technique is different. So those use the transistors and those use the capacitors. DRAM use the capacitors, and capacitors discharge after some time. So you have to basically system refresh the RAMs after every 2 milliseconds. So different type of RAMs we talked earlier, dips and sips and sims and dims and SDRAM. So data bit size for SDRAM is 64-bit data bus. And the type of the RAMs we talked earlier, DDR, double data rate. Double rate DDR2, DDR3, and DDR5 is also available. In laptop, we use a SODIMM kind of DDR. So when you are selecting RAMs to assemble your computer, what parameters you should consider? So first thing is always consider all the devices must be compatible with the motherboard, right? With the CPU. So RAM must be compatible with the motherboard. The speed of the RAM must be supported by the chipset, and new RAM may be needed when an application locks up or the computer displays. Sometimes you may need to extend the system memory. You know why? Maybe system is slower or some applications requires more memory as you're working some in other courses where you're installing different softwares, right? So different softwares requires different amount of the memory. Maybe you don't have the enough memory to install those new software on your machine or another customer machine. So you need to extend the memory, right? So when you are expanding the memory, so you make sure that it is compatible with the existing memory. So memory may also be categorized as buffered or unbuffered. Unbuffered memory is basically a regular memory for the computers, right? So computer reads data directly from the memory banks and making it faster than the buffered memory. Buffered memory used in server systems, huge computers, where the data is temporarily stored in the buffer, and from buffer that it is transferred to and from the memory. Uh, so now the question is, how are you going to attach a CPU to your motherboard? So look at this assembly here. It's quite easier to install. All you need to care about, handle them carefully. You look at this one. So you have to wear the proper gloves, ESD procedure, ESD straps, uh, because those are the very sensitive kind of components. So you need to pull up this lever and open this door. This is the socket door, right? Socket assembly. And then you align the CPU. There's a notches in the corner of the CPU. And you must align those notches of the CPU. You see this notch. So you must align it with the CPU frame, or right? So caution is when handling a CPU, do not touch the CPU contacts. Do not touch this side. This side is the contact side, because you may pass the ESD through your hand to the device and it may damage the device. Be sure that the heat sink and the fan assembly are correctly installed. So hold the CPU from the corners like this, right? not from the top, not from the top, and then align them with the slots. And then once you seat the CPU in the frame, in a socket, then you pull this lever back to the down position. It's a zero insertion for zip socket, so you don't have to push too hard to make a connection. Once you place the CPU, you have to attach a heat sink and fan assembly. So before you connect the heat sink and fan assembly, you place some thermocouple. So you see here this injection type tube. What do you think? What is the use of this injection? What is the use of this injection? That is basically has some thermocouple paste. Uh, uh, that's thermocouple paste is basically a kind of a paste which provides the additional cooling to the system. So to install or reseat a used CPU, clean it in the base of the heat sink with the isopropyl alcohol to remove the old thermocouple compound before you apply the new one. For instance, if you are upgrading it, right? So there is already thermocouple is already there at the top of CPU surface, right? So you have to clean it with the alcohol, and then you apply the new thermocouple paste, and then you seat the fan and heatsink assembly. Okay, how do you place the memory in the slots? It is also easier. Remember, all those kind of slots are zip kind of. Zip means you don't need to push too hard to seed this memory to the slot, right? So, if easier
There
it
are
is.
clip at the ends, ma'am. We can put it
Yes,
easier.
yeah, there are the clips at the end. You have to move those clips uh, in the down position a little bit, right? And then you push those memory a little bit down, push slightly down, and then you put the clips back to the original position. I think I had a picture. No. Okay. Anyways, so this picture doesn't shows the clips, but there are clips. Yes. RAM is basically highly sensitive to the ESD as well. You don't touch any of those chips, right? Because you have to hold the memory from the corners from here. You know, uh, make sure to check the marking before apply any pressure. Don't apply too much pressure. Remember, right? I have to insert it. It's not working. I tried it again and again. You install the memory, it's not detectable, right? Maybe it is not compatible with your motherboard. Maybe it is not compatible with the existing memory module. Maybe you are installing in the wrong slot. So before, don't think that I have to apply more pressure to make it working, right? So check the BIOS first once you install the memory. So you go to the BIOS and check it there whether your memory is detectable or not. If it didn't detect the memory, it means you didn't place the memory in the either in not in the right slot or not the right module. Or maybe it is little loose. Sometime it is little loose. Maybe you not clipped it properly. The levers at the end, so those things you have to double check. Okay. So don't forget to use the documentation, the vendor website, and you have when you're purchasing the memory, you make sure that it is compatible with the motherboard as well. So so you have installed memory, you have installed CPU in the socket, heat and fan assembly after applying thermocouple. What is next? Now you need to seat your motherboard on the case, right? So how do you install the motherboard? Motherboard has a small stand, plastic and metal stands which are used to mount the motherboard at the correct height to prevent it from touching the metal portion of the case and the ground of the motherboard to the case. Motherboard, the case is basically also provide ground to the system, right? So motherboard shouldn't be touching the case assembly. So how do we protect motherboard not to touch the case assembly? We use the small stands of small stand stops make this motherboard or provide the motherboard a little height. Those stand stops can be of metal kind or can be of plastic type. Okay, so you have installed motherboard, all those devices along with motherboard. What is next? So make now you're going to select the right hard drive, right? So what you consider when you're selecting in hard drive? Well, the how much space you required, right? So size of the hard drive, you can have 3.5 or 2.5. A hard drive comes up in different RPMs, revolution per minutes. So revolution per, if it is a magnetic type, if it is an SSD kind or NVMe or M.2, which I have explained you last time, it doesn't have RPM then. This is for the magnetic type. HDD, when we say HDD, it defaults is a magnetic type, right? Which has read-write head, which rotates at a speed of 5,400 or 7,200 or 10,000. Those are the different speeds. So how do you connect them? You have two uh, type of cables like ID or PATA cables or SATA cables. So you select the hard drive, you select the optical drive. The optical drive size is 5.25, read write or CD type or Blu-rays, whatever. Okay, now it's time to install the hard drive and CD drive in the case assembly. Case assembly has different those are the bay points, right? Where you tie up the screws of the hard drive or optical drive or second hard drive. So install the internal drive. You need to place your hard drive in empty bay. So there are those are the bays, right? Bays are just like in a place where you plug in or the hard drive or optical drive or the power supply has a specific kind size of the bay, but it is on the top of it, right? So leave some space between the drives when you are installing multiple drives, and drive metal plate shouldn't face up to allow the battery. The drive metal plate should face up to allow the better heat dissipations, right? So this is the bottom sides of the hard drive, and it should be the metal surface is facing up. Okay, so how do you install optical drive? So optical drive, those are the bay area, right? Those are the bay area where you install or place optical drive or hard drive or first hard drive or second hard drive. So what is steps you follow to install the optical drive? So number one is steps from the front of the case, choose the drive bay that you want to hold the drive and then remove the faceplate from the bay if necessary. The faceplate is this is the faceplate, right? So you remove the faceplate so you can insert the drive in one of the bay areas. So you can place it at the top or you can place it in somewhere. If this area is available, so you can plug in place your CD drive at the top. So the position of optical drive so that it aligns with the 5.25-inch drive bay. So the size of the optical drive and the size of the bay should be compatible. Insert the optical drive into the drive bay so that the optical drive screws holes align with the screw holes in the case. So this there is an screw space, right? And there is also screws in the case area, so it should be aligned together. So screw the optical drive to the case using the proper screws. So here is the installation tip. Slightly hand tighten all the screws before tightening any of them with a screwdriver. So this will make it easier to tighten the last two screws. So you have pretty much done. You have installed your motherboard, hard drive, optical drive. Question if you have.
No, ma'am.
Okay, so once you have installed your motherboard, you can install your adapters, the different size. Well, adapters should be goes in the proper expansion slots. So remember the expansion slots we talked yesterday, AGP, PCI, and PCIe. AGP is used for graphic cards. So colors are different, right? So you can recognize them, what type of slot it is. Those are the older type of the slots, PCI white colored. Some computers still have them. PCIe Express cards are comes up in like in black or gray or blue colors. So you would see some tag there. This is PCIe by 16 or PCIe by 1. Those are the small slots. So what I mean by 16 or by PCIe by 1 or by 4 or by 8, those are basically serial bus, right? They are connected to the serial bus. So if it is a kind of 16x or 8x or 4x or 1x, it means there are 16 um, conduct channels, 16 channels, right? 16 pathway you can think, or bus size is 16, right? That's and 16 bus is such a serial. It doesn't mean that it's going to be yes. So 16 means the data travels serially, but it increased by 60 times faster, right? Because you have 16 highways available to send the data rather than just one highway or pathway, as I told you yesterday. Serial and parallel port devices, serial which transfer one bit at a time on a one conduction path. But here are the 16 conduction paths. So the data speed is basically 16 times faster as compared to the 1x, and it is a 4 times faster, 8 times faster, right? So I think those different cards we talked about yesterday. So how are you going to install the adapter cards? How do you install? So those are the back face plates. So you remove the face plate. So you can insert the typical kind of slot, typical kind of adapter into the slot. So here is some installation tip. So research the length of the video card. Longer card may not be compatible with certain motherboards. Uh, in some cases, has a small slots at the bottom of the hole where the cover was removed, and slide the bottom of the mounting bracket into the slot before seating the card. Okay, so you install the adapter card Uh, Once devices have been installed, now it's time to connect the front panel cables. Those are the front panel cables is going to be connected to the connector header. We have it on motherboard, right? So those are the basically those have the holes, right? So they connected here, they plugged in here, right? So what is this front panel connector functions? You remember that your desktop, or if you have seen any desktop, so it shows in a hard drive LEDs is blinking or power LEDs on and off, right? So those are the indications. Those are the LEDs which basically turn on to indicate that this function is being performed, right? So
I
power,
think it's yellow and red light.
yeah, those are the different colors like green, yellow, red. Yes. So if just in case, yes.
Manvir muted.
Manager ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਲਾ
So those are the yes, those are the front panel LEDs, and those are just indicating that whether the function, the particular device is working properly or not, right? So, like if hard disk is not working, how do you know it's working or not working? Well, you turn on the system, right? And it's not booting up. So, how do you know the hard disk is not working? Hard disk LED would not glow. So, this LED will glow up or lit up if it's performing read write operation. The hard disk is reading or writing, the system is reading, writing from the hard drive. So those are the power LEDs and reset LEDs, reset switches. So those are the front panels connector. So you install them at the end, right? For reset, power button, drive activity, system speaker. It's an indicator LEDs, nothing else. Um, so USB connectors. You also connect the USB connector. USB comes up with USB 3 and USB 2 was the older version. But some desktop, laptop computers still have the USB 2. So USB 3 and USB 4, basically those are the universal serial bus connectors and ports. It's it has to be connected on the motherboard, the internal USB connector. Okay, so you have connected, installed the front panel cables. So you must align the pin 1 of the 2-pin front panels to their corresponding holders. Um, and then make sure that you have connected the power to the system board, power to the hard drive, power to the your optical drive, and any other auxiliary power if required. So you must identify those kind of power connectors coming out of the power supply, right? So it goes to different devices. This is for a SATA kind of hard drive or optical drive. ADX was used in older kind of ADX is used in in our system board, right? So ADX is the system board power connector. Burge is used. Uh, Burge is also the type of the connector we use in the older devices, Burge and Molex kind. Auxiliary, some motherboard has an auxiliary power connector holder. So it is on the top or additional provides additional power supply to the motherboard on the top of ATX, right? So PCI cards, those goes to the PCI, Molex and Birch connected to the PCI card. It may take additional or 6 to 8 pin power connector. So you install the cables. This is ATX. So it has an header, corresponding header. I'm going to give you a video demonstration as well how to do this installation. Data connectors, data cables, PATA or SATA connectors, you connect it to the hard drive. Those are the data cables. Okay. If you have question, you can ask at this point.
No, ma'am.
No,
Okay.
ma'am.
No question. Okay. So let me give you another assignment. I'll post it today, but you don't have to submit it today. Um, that is, let me see. 1 second. If I go to item, yeah, 1 second. I'm just making the assignment available to you. Okay, assignment 2 is there. Um, I'll explain it. Have a look at the assignment and see what it is, what kind of questions are there. The things, what how to install the system, how to install or assembling, I have explained you. Uh, disassembling computer is another part. Let me see if I can share one more thing with you. If I go to just 1 second. I'm trying to. Okay. I think I can share this one. Uh,
At the top is the power supply with the power cords coming from it. The one big board in the back is the motherboard. The major component on the motherboard is the processor, which is hidden underneath the CPU fan to keep the processor cool. Okay, we're looking inside a computer case, identifying the major components inside. At the top,
Can you hear the voice of this video?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes,
is the
ma'am.
power supply with power cords coming from it. The one big board in the back is the motherboard. The major component on the motherboard is the processor, which is hidden underneath the CPU fan to keep the processor cool. Over here are memory slots for memory modules. There's one DIMM installed. Down below are expansion slots for expansion cards. There's a video card here installed in a PCI Express slot, and a modem card here installed in a regular PCI slot. Over here on the side are drive bays. Here is a CD-ROM drive installed at the top. Here's a hard drive installed. This is a floppy disk, and the second hard drive at the bottom. Here are data cables. These are serial cables connected to the hard drives, and this cable is the floppy drive cable, and that cable is for the CD-ROM. These are all power cords, all tied together to keep them out of the way, and these cords connect to the front panel to the motherboard for the leads on the front panel. And that's the major components inside the PC case.
Okay, that's a quick overview inside the computer. 1 second.
Okay, here we're going to show how to open a computer case. With this case, we have to start with the front panel. There's a lever on the bottom of the panel that I've got to push and pull to release the lever, and it releases the bottom of the panel. And then I can lift it back, and there's two notches on the back that I can release the two notches and pull it apart and lay it aside. The next step is there's one screw holding this whole panel in place. So I remove the one screw and lay it aside. And then I've got to slide the panel this way until it releases, and then I can lift it up and out of the groove at the bottom of the side panel. And that's opening a computer case.
See how quick it is. Okay, one thing I want to show you. This one.
We're talking about installing a motherboard into the case. Before you install the motherboard, you need to study it very carefully, decide what components you're going to be using and where everything is on the board. Begin with the motherboard manual. You really need to read this manual from cover to cover to learn everything about your motherboard so you know what features you have. In it, you'll find a motherboard layout that'll identify everything on the board, and then it'll go into great detail about each one. This motherboard, the processor has already been installed here. We have the cooler over here. It's turned upside down, but it'll later be installed like this after the motherboard goes into the case. And memory is here. Expansion slots are over here. The important things that we need to know about is to identify the connectors we'll use. This connector will be used to power the board, and also this one back here. We're going to install two hard drives, and they're going to use serial cables here. And I've identified the two serial ports. There are actually 4 ports here, but we'll use the first 2 red ones. There's a DVD drive that will be installed using this cable, and it will be installed on this particular connector down here. And there's one jumper that we need to be aware of, and that's this one right here. This jumper is the clear real-time clock jumper, or the one that clears CMOS RAM of any changes we've made, including the supervisor password, power on password. And all that information we now have ready, so we understand our board and we're ready to put it into the case.
Okay, What did you notice? Okay, did you notice the real-time reset button, right? So that's a jumper, not a button. It's a real-time jumper, which basically used to reset your CMOS. Um, how to place your motherboard.
We're installing the Pentium 4 processor into socket 775. I first open the socket up by pushing down on the lever on the side and lifting the lever up and over. And then I can raise the socket cover up out of the way. And here's the processor. It has an arrow here to help orient us to the little cutoff side of the socket. A notch here and here, which further helps us orient it so it goes in correctly. Look over at the bottom of the processor. So I'm going to drop the processor down into the socket, close the cover, and when I push the lever down, that's when the pressure is put down on it to lock it into place. And that's installing the Pentium 4 into socket 775.
Yes. Did you watch how to place the CPU inside the socket?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
It's easy. Only thing is you need to follow the safety precautions. Nothing complicated. I think I need to show you one more thing.
One new feature is onboard wireless. This motherboard has an onboard wireless port. We are talking about some of the latest features on motherboards. One new feature is onboard wireless. This motherboard has an onboard wireless port. We can screw in an antenna. The port comes out the rear of the case, and you can raise the antenna to get a good access to a hotspot, or you can configure it to become its own access point. Another new feature on motherboards is PCI Express. There are currently 4 new PCI slots. This motherboard has 2 types of slots. This one is PCI by 1, the slowest, another PCI by 1, and this one is PCI by 16, the fastest current PCI Express slots. PCI Express cards can fit into larger slots. For example, we could put a PCI by 1 card into this slot, or the PCI by 4 slot, which is about this wide, or the PCI by 8 slot, which is about this wide, or we can put it into the PCI by 16 slot, which is that wide. And that's what's happening today with motherboards' new features.
All right. See, so you have learned like in slides and discussion in PowerPoint. It's just a quick demonstration to see how the real things existing. So you can experience it. And I told you to buy some older kind of system, and so you can just look around this inside, look inside the system. And one more thing I want to share with you. Installing. I think this one I showed
Okay.
you. This one I showed you. Hmm.
we are surrounded by an assortment of expansion cards. We're just looking at each one in turn. All of these on this side are video cards. You can identify a card the easiest way is by looking at the ports on the back of the card. And these are all analog video ports. Some of the newer cards now have analog ports as well as digital ports on the card and an S-video port to connect to television. Some of the low-end video cards have extra, or lower or older cards had extra slots on the card where you could add video memory. Then you can have heat sinks or fans. In this case, this has both heat sink and fan to help cool these high-end graphics cards. The next group of cards, this is a couple of network cards. You can identify it by the Ethernet port on the front, and there should be little lights on the back of the card too to help troubleshoot the network cards. These three cards here are modem cards. Not much to say about modem cards nowadays. They pretty much stabilized and haven't changed much in some time. They should each have two phone jack ports. Over here, a couple of low-end SCSI cards. SCSI cards can get very expensive and very complicated, but these are low-end cards for simple SCSI systems. This one has only one port, but this one has both an external port and an internal port. This is a sound card. Sound cards have internal connectors and also several different types of sound ports on the card. And that's an assortment of expansion cards.
Okay, question if you have. Okay, let's see how to install hard drive.
And here is the read-write head for the top. We're going to look inside a hard drive. We have a hard drive here that's ruined, and as soon as we open the cover, it's definitely going to be ruined as we expose it to the air and the dust in the air. I've already removed the screws from the four corners that's holding the two covers in place. I'll lift up the cover and look inside. I see there's two platters, one on top of the other, and here is the read-write head for the top surface of the top platter. I can move that read-write head to the inside track and then outward to the outside track. There are four read-write heads, top, bottom, for a total of 4 heads for this hard drive.
Okay. Okay, hope you enjoyed watching those videos.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
ma'am.
I'm hoping that it helpful to clarify any of the confusion if you had it when I was explaining you the things, how it is, how does it work, and how to install. All right, so if you like to have a 5 minutes break, so you can have 8:35 is right now, can come back after 5 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
So you guys are finished with the break, right?
Yes,
Shall
ma'am. Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
so- okay, all right. Thank you. So shall we start or resume our rest of the topic? What are we going to discuss further? You know, what you have learned today. Tell me first, what have you learned today since morning? Can just in your words.
About the slots, how to put the RAM inside, and how to put the processor. About the ports which are behind the CPU,
Okay.
and
Also,
about the USB portal, USB 2, USB 3.
Mm-hmm.
quick review of motherboard, CPU.
Okay.
Install the adapter cards.
Install adapter card. Okay.
Install
Yes.
the front panel
Install
cables.
the
Connect
optical,
internal cables. Power cables.
The whole
install
component of
optical drive.
Optical drive, how to place optical. So we normally place optical drive right at the top way, the very first way, because it's heavier than any other device, right?
Yes,
Hard
ma'am.
drive, it's bigger and heavier than hard drive. So we put it at the top bay. In the other bays which are available for, we can place first hard drive or second hard drive. Yes. Anything else you studied today or learned today?
Motherboard expansion slots.
Expansion slots. Okay. Uh, oh, so anyone can you name if you don't mind? I'm not like grading you. I'm just wondering. One way, one lane highway. So, but two-way highway can can carry more traffic, correct? And three-lane highway can carry more traffic. Similarly, here, this is 8-lane highway or 16-lane or 4x or 1x, right? So this is the fastest one, 16x. Yes, anything else? That's it? I think you guys forgot about,
Ma'am, quick view of inside the CPU.
okay, very good. Did you forget about how to cool down your CPU, right? We need,
No, ma'am.
yes, what it is, what required to cool down the
Thermal
CPU?
paste.
Thermocouple, yes,
Thermal paste. To
thermal
clean it, we use alcohol paste.
Yeah, if it is an upgrading, so we are using an older CPU which already have some layer of thermocouple paste at the top. So you first clean it with isopropyl alcohol, and then we place the new paste, and then on the top of it we place the heat sink and then fan. So when we place the heat sink on CPU, there might be some little gap in between. So this little gap is basically filled up by thermocouple paste, right? So thermocouple basically fill up the gap between between heat sink and CPU assembly, right? Okay. So that's, I think you guys remember the terminologies and things we talk about. That sounds good. Okay. So let's go further inside the hardware. So I give you the thought how to assemble. Those are the things involved when you're assembling the system. Now you have assembled the system, right? So you need to check it out whether it's working properly or not. So, what is the first thing can help you to verify? You assemble the computers. You just have, let's suppose, assemble the computer with motherboards and optical drive and hard drive and port and adapter cards, etc., etc., etc. According to the manual, according to the vendor website, and the knowledge you have it. Okay. So now you need to turn on your system to see if it is working or not, right? So this process we call booting the computer, right? and then we configure the BIOS and UFI setting. So I'm going to tell you briefly what is the BIOS and what is the UFI setting, and what is post BIOS, CMOS, and UFI terminologies. So electrical power, we discussed earlier those things. So if I have time, I will review them again. All right, so let's uh, have a thought about the BIOS. BIOS is basically involved the booting the computer. What I mean by booting the computer. Have you ever heard this term before? Booting
When
the
we
computer.
ma'am start the PC, there is
Starting the
F1 to
PC.
boot. We can boot the process.
Just like you go outside, when you're going outside, you prepare yourself, right? So nowadays we need to wear the mask and etc. etc. But earlier we only cared to whether we are wearing the boot or not, right? So we should wear the boot in order to step out of the home, correct? Right? So it's not like that. But I'm just giving you an example. Uh, Preparing a system. Booting means preparing the system. Is this computer is good to go or not? Right? So this process is called booting computer. Booting computer means testing computer, how much memory is there, what kind of CPU is there, what is date today, and what is the setting, or how much memory is there, right? So this all verification and testing of system before before it loads the operating system, right? So operating system, we say operate computer. So who is taking care of booting process? What do you think? Because operating system will be loaded after booting, right? After booting process, after verification, testing. Hard disk is doing well, memory is good to go, processor speed, all those things is tested and verified. So who's taking care of this booting process? What do you think? Who is on the top of operating system? No idea. I think I gave you a little thought earlier. Um, that's a BIOS. Basic input output system, routines. Those are the routines, right? So power on self test. Power on self test. So power on self test is a kind of BIOS routine, which basically tests the system configuration. If it is good to go, if something is not working, it will report you at the point, right? Immediately, how does it report? What do you think? Have you ever heard about post?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Well, you said that we are expert in computer hardware. We run our business and we have a lot of information, right? No, don't worry, don't worry. I'm just kidding. Um, we are here to learn, right? So that's important. So post basically tells the test the system, and if it finds any problem in the system, for instance, not good enough memory, or not properly installed memory, or not properly compatible memory, or hard disk not working, or CPU stop working, right? Or some adapter card is not responding. So how does it tell you that which device is not working? Because it's verifying, right? Whether the device are working or not. So how does it tell you? It generates some beep codes. Have you ever heard any beep when you turn on your, more specifically, when you turn on your desktop computer? You know,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
so single beep is good. Beep. But if you hear a long beep or sequence of beeps, it means something wrong, right? What does something basically? That beep sequence has a code, has a specific code which tells you what is exactly wrong. You understand what I mean?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is what we call beep code, right? So this is happening before the system or BIOS load the operating system from hard drive to memory. So post is basically when a computer is booted, the basic input output system or BIOS performs a hardware check on all internal components of computer. And this check is called power on self test, abbreviated as post. Uh, if a device is malfunctioning, an error or a beep could alert the technician of the problem. BIOS manufacturer uses different, BIOS comes from different vendors, right? So when you turn on your system and you go to the BIOS, it tells you who is the vendor, who is the manufacturer of that BIOS. American or some different vendors are there, ASUS or different vendors manufacturer are there in industry which provide the BIOS to the system. So BIOS manufacturer use different codes to indicate the different hardware problems. So motherboard manufacturer may use different beep code. So those are two different things. BIOS in motherboard. Those are not same. Always consult the motherboard documentation to get the beep codes for your computer because it varies from one manufacturer. For instance, uh, if one BIOS manufacturer says one long beep means the CPU is not working. Maybe other BIOS manufacturer says one long beep kind of sound for longer period. So it may be like in overheating CPU or maybe malfunctioning motherboard, right? So those error code vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. It's not in hard code. Hey, one beep means this all the time. Two beep means or three beep means this all the time for all kind of computers. It's not that true. So to access the BIOS, you need to press the specific key during the post. Do you know the key for your system? What is the specific key?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever used which one you used?
F12, ma'am.
F12. Some people use F12. Okay. Uh, how do you get to the BIOS?
F1 also, ma'am.
F1. Well, it's different from different
F10,
company.
ma'am.
So for you it is F10. Okay. Anybody use Dell key? So you use the Dell key to get into the BIOS. Okay. Some people may use F9. Anybody use F9 or Escape? So it varies from manufacturer to manufacturer, right?
Sometimes ma'am, it's press any key to boost.
To press any key to boot. Okay. Yeah, to continue. Once you can get into the BIOS and you want to continue the boot process, then um,
Enter.
yeah, you have to press any key. Okay. Now the point is where this BIOS is stored. This is the BIOS chip. BIOS chip is smaller, right? So where this BIOS is, I told you, showed you in the video, RTC. Uh, RTC jumper on the motherboard. So which is basically used to reset the BIOS password. Sometimes we place the password and we forget that password and we need to reset it. So we use the jumpers, which is affiliated with this CMOS password reset, or sometimes we use that jumper also to reset the BIOS setting to the factory default. So all motherboard needs a BIOS to operate. BIOS is a ROM chip. This is a small ROM chip, right? We talked earlier on motherboard that contains in small programs, hard code programs, right? And which basically controls the communication between operating system. You know, there is three levels of communication. One is the software program, right? Software. And another is hardware, right? And another is firmware. Firmware. So firmware is basically in between hardware and software. Firmware is in hard code programs which is stored in ROM BIOS. You understand what I mean?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes,
Good.
ma'am.
All right, good. Um, so along with the post, BIOS also identify which drives are available and which drives are bootable. You know, you have a CD drive, you have hard drive, you have network drive, right? Or you may have some USB drive. So there are different type of drive your system has. Well, how the BIOS know that which drive contains the operating system information or booting information, or which is the bootable? By default, hard drive is bootable, right? Means system BIOS read the hard drive boot sector and get the information to load the operating system. But if you're troubleshooting a malfunctioning computer which cannot boot from the hard drive, right? So then you use the CD or DVD to boot it from, right? So, well, you need to tell inside the BIOS now my boot sequence is changed from hard drive. So BIOS has a boot sequence. At first, you tell that check this one. If it doesn't work, then it goes to second, and then it goes to third, or it may go to the fourth. Well, that is the sequence. We call it the boot sequence. Boot sequence. And we specified, have you ever set up the boot sequence in your BIOS? Any of you? Well, why did you get into the BIOS? What did you do there? What setting or changes you made there? Have you ever made any changes there?
Time, date, ma'am.
Time and date. Okay. Anything else?
Virtualization off and on.
Yes, virtualization off and on. Okay, very good. Yes, those are the common use. Okay. And the third common use could be boot sequence order. So for instance, if you don't like to boot from hard drive for some reasons, you want to boot it from the second drive, right? Or CD drive. So you have to assign CD the first boot or sequence and the hard drive second and the network third and so on, if it is available in your system, right? So BIOS has all this a lot of system information, hard drive information, memory configuration, PCI, SATA, motherboard, power management, overclocking, all those parameters controlled from the BIOS setup. Uh, BIOS in CMOS, this is what? What do you think? What does it looks like? What do you think? Someone can anticipate? What does it looks like? I told you yesterday. Let me see if you remember.
Coin.
It's a coin, right? Yes. It's a coin shape, silver coin shape, RTS. Silver coin shaped battery. Battery for what? What do you think? It is the battery for CMOS. It requires battery, you know, it requires battery because it has program, right? Well, it does not require battery from the power outlet, but it does require battery from the motherboard. So how the motherboard provides power to the CMOS through this CMOS battery, right? It has a pretty long life, 10, 15 years. Should be good enough for your computer. So it lives longer. Has a particular number, 2032. 2032 is in the standard battery number for CMOS. So the BIOS setting are retained by CMOS using a battery. If battery fails, setting can be lost. This is the screen for UFI. So have you ever been in UFI, Unified Extensible Firmware Interface? It is now introduced in new computers. Have been there like last 5 years or something like that. So this is ASUS UFI BIOS utility. It's a utility, advanced version of BIOS. The difference is that it allows you more configuration. One thing is you can easily see there, notice that. So you can see the temperature, CMOS temperature, parameters, clock, voltage. There are many more options are there, right? Another thing is you can change or you can manage the CMOS setting or BIOS setting using the mouse arrow. In older kind of BIOS, we cannot use the mouse as an input device. We have to use the keyboard arrow keys. All new computers come with excuse me, UFI, which provide additional features and addresses security issues with legacy BIOS. Legacy BIOS, I think I have a screen for legacy. Not in this slide. Okay, I'll show you some videos about that if I have time, or I'll post it on detail. You can watch it. So BIOS basically, when UFI can run up to 32-bit or 64-bit systems and support larger boot drives and includes additional features such as secure boot. Secure boot ensures that your computer boots to the specified operating system, and this helps prevent rootkit from taking over the system. Have you ever heard about rootkits? It's a kind of virus, you know, it's
Yes,
yes, it's malfunctioning, right? Virus. So
malware functioning.
it's a malware function. So it takes the control of your system and it runs its own operating system, take the control of operating system. But this UFI make your operating system secure that no other operating system can run other than the one which is authenticated by the system, the UFI setting. Um, the legacy BIOS basically supports some security feature to protect the BIOS setting. However, UFI adds additional security features like password is available in both UFI and legacy one. The drive encryption. Drive encryption is, you left your system, you don't carry all your desktop all the way, like everywhere in like office areas, where there is big offices. There are a lineup of like stations and desktop computers. Well, someone can take off the hard drive, right? So can steal the hard drive inside the system, you know. So how to if someone is steal the hard drive, but it cannot read that hard drive, you know why? Because of this drive encryptions utility which comes up inside the UFI. So it prevents the data from being read or being read from a hard drive, even if the hard drive is moved to another computer. Someone is steal the hard drive. Hey, I need that data, right? And try to plug it into to the another computer, but it won't work. You know why? Because it was encrypted by the drive encryption utility. Encryption is a utility which basically encode the information or hide the information. Like you enter the password, you know, password when you enter on the password window, you can enter in front of anyone, right? But nobody knows what you are entering because the password is hashed code. This is what we call hash code. Excuse me. So, a LoJack is a security feature that allows the owner to locate or lock or delete the file from the device. If you have implied LoJack utility, trusted platform modules, you can check inside your system whether you have TPM enabled on your system or not. TPM is a chip which is basically installed on the motherboard. And this chip is designed to secure the hardware by storing in some encryption key, digital certificate, and password and data. So if even your system is stolen, but nobody can access anything from your system, right? Because of TPM lock, it locks everything, right? Uh, Secure lock is a kind of like a digital lock, you know. Digital lock is an encryption key, a code. So which is provided by the TPM chip. Secure boot basically is a UFI security standard that ensures that the computer only boots an operating system that is trusted by the motherboard manufacturer. So no other operating system can get the control of your system, you know. Um, any malfunctioning operating system cannot get the control because of the secure boot option is enabled. Let me see if I can make it just a little bit bigger. Uh, no. Hmm, okay. Okay, so you understand the security features available inside BIOS and UFI. So, well, you can update the BIOS, you know. Have you ever heard someone has updated the BIOS? BIOS can be updated, even it is ROM BIOS, right? But manufacturer allows you, because I told you it's a new kind of ROM BIOS or E2P ROM kind, which is electronically erasable, programmable read-only memory. We can erase it and we can write it. But there is a special program, EEPROM program, which you can find it from the manufacturer website. So just in case if some changes has been made, if you install a new memory, for instance, right, and you check with the manual, it is exactly compatible as it is mentioned in the manual, manufacturer manual, right? But it's still not recognized inside the BIOS. So what could be the reason? What do you think? Maybe your BIOS is outdated, right? It's not recognizing your new memory. So you have to update the BIOS. In order to update the BIOS, you go to the manufacturer website and download the latest version of BIOS of your particular motherboard, right? So for your BIOS, system BIOS. And then you can upload this one into your system BIOS. So this is what we call this whole process we call flashing the BIOS. Flashing the BIOS means you update the BIOS or you rewrite the BIOS, right? So to download a new BIOS, consult the manufacturer website and follow the recommended installation procedure. That's some little story about the BIOS and CMOS, which are the two other most important hardware on the motherboard. Okay. So if you have a question, you can ask me at this point before I go for the attendance.
No, ma'am.
So things are clear, crystal clear, hopefully. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am. Crystal clear.
Crystal clear.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you want me to roll call your attendance? To check out the assignment document, assignment 2 document, and try to read it and see what instructions are there.
How many years we have to complete it?
Good question. A very funny question, eh? How many years you need? Did I post the solution as well? Really? Okay, so okay, it requires a software download. This one is Spassy. You see on my screen. The link is given in the in the document. It doesn't require years. It requires some a few days. I can give you like 1.5 week or 1 week if 1 week is not enough, right? So you don't have to complete in just in one sitting. Just take your time because it's a compact assignment for covering for all hardware configuration. I'm going to teach further. It's going to cover that one as well. That's why I give you the one assignment covering the whole uh, whole lot of hardware discussion, all those things. Um, it requires an start from the downloading the software, especially. Especially is a free software, and the link is given in the document. Try to download it and see if you can do that. So if it doesn't work, downloads you can post some question on discussion forum and shout there, help me, I cannot download it. Someone will gonna help you out there for sure. I know you people so love to help each other. Is that correct? No?
No, ma'am.
Sare madam
Really?
ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਹੀ ਆ.
Huh?
We love to help each other, ma'am. We are friendly with each other.
You love to help each other, love to help in each other in tests and quizzes?
Yes,
You love,
ma'am.
really?
Test तो कुछ नहीं करता मैडम कोई.
Huh? You don't, so you love to help in tests and quizzes? Some people
In
stuff.
all
No, ma'am.
Hmm?
No, ma'am, not in test, ma'am.
Everyone
Really?
should give their
No
own
Well,
tests,
test.
that's
ma'am.
the main time.
We are
You
honest.
yes,
Otherwise,
ma'am.
they won't become smart like me.
you know that's
Wow,
a
you are very smart, bro.
that's a critical time to help
Thank
the
you, bro.
friend.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I really appreciate.
that's a critical time to be helped, right? That the exam time is the most critical
Exactly.
time. If and you know the friend is the real friend is only the friend when he helps you in need, right? So you
How
need
do
more,
you do it, brother? I just need classes from you.
huh?
Actually,
Sorry.
ma'am is a better teacher than me.
Yeah, that's why we are taking classes from ma'am. But I need to take classes from you also, bro.
Um, it will require a fees.
It's okay.
What do you, what you guys are
How much
talking
are you
about?
willing to pay?
बल्ले बल्ले बड़ा हंसा
What you guys are talking about? I don't understand. You
Ma'am,
want
we
me
were talking that we should have intelligence classes from ma'am. Ma'am is too intelligent.
student intelligent? Okay, let me make it free for you. You know, so discussion forum is honesty is the best policy. That's very true. Cheating is not the best strategy. I like it. Who said that quotations? Just Paul. Just Paul. That's good
Ma'am, the
quotation.
person who made this quotation, honesty is best policy, he was the first liar in the world.
Really? You
Yeah.
you disrespect the people's opinion. Don't disrespect people's opinion, even you don't agree upon it, right? Like
Ma'am,
you know,
I
Yes,
respect your
ma'am.
opinion, but ma'am,
I tell you
really,
tons of things, right? Not agree upon it, right? But you don't show up that you're not agreeing upon. That's a respect, right? So if you don't agree upon with someone's thought or something, opinion, honesty is the best policy. This is what the Canada college course outline also says there, right? So
Yes,
honesty is the
ma'am.
best.
madam,
If you Yeah, so if you read the course, the policy there, college policy there, what the Jaswal said, you will find that quotation there. In other words, in college terminology.
we are
Uh,
making our quotation as soon as possible because it's not valuable right now these days.
honesty is no more is respectable. No, who is the honest is being treated as a stupid person, right? He's the or
Madam,
she's the
bhai,
stupid. Being honest is now stupidity, right? But don't care about it. If you are honest, you satisfy yourself. But don't care about other people.
Yes, ma'am.
What other people think? Hey, he or she is stupid. He's honest. He's trying to be honest, right? How he gonna survive or she gonna survive? That's true. It's challenging. It's very challenging. Survival becomes challenging, but I think self satisfaction is more important. Uh, Anyways, that's a long discussion, and this is a program you can download and get a free help from discussion panel. You know how you can get there? Simply go to if I would be you. Let me try to mimic that scenario. Uh, okay, so got a problem? Go to the discussion forum, right? Okay, I'm going to create a thread there. Okay, 1 second. I think you cannot see the discussion forum. Ask question thread there. Okay, 1 second. Let me do it immediately before we finish the class. Uh, I think I created. Is it the right class, right? Section 78. Am I right? Let me double check. Yes, this section is 78. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a discussion thread, just like the introduction thread, right? That's going to be new forum and ask question, post, ask question, stance.
Ma'am, can I say something instead of lecture?
Yes,
Ma'am, you really have a good vibes.
I have really have a
Good
good,
vibes.
good vibes.
Yeah.
He's saying wife.
Vibes.
Vibes.
Yeah.
Whites. Okay,
Nice.
I'm not that good, in English. English is not my first language.
Which
Anyways,
language you speak, ma'am, then?
huh?
Which language you speak then? What's your mother language?
My mother tongue is Urdu. I speak Urdu in home.
Are you from Pakistan?
Yes.
Ma'am, then
Origin.
From
we
where
are
Pakistan?
neighbors. Then
Huh?
we are neighbors, ma'am.
Pakistan Jindabad.
Which city?
From Karachi, but I migrated long time before in Canada.
Then
Canada
we
is.
are neighbors, ma'am.
Hmm? Well,
Then we
one second. Let me create this discussion forum. Please ask your questions in the post.
Attendance, ma'am.
Yeah, I know your answers and your suggestions. Questions here. Okay, so I had created a discussion forum there. Add a topic. Okay, add a topic. Let's see. Questions. Okay, let's see if you can access it under the discussion forum. So someone is asking help outside the class. That's totally fine. It's totally fine. Well, because you are away from each other, like no physical interaction as you would have it in physical classroom. So what I can suggest, if you're going to miss those kind of things, your friendship discussion, your friendship help, your friendly help from your friends. So you can come to the discussion forum and make an open discussion. Well, right? I would be the third person. You guys, first and second person, post your question. Maybe someone else has that question resolved, and one of your friend can move forward and post, hey, do this. I tried this one and it works for me. If I found this not good suggestion, then I'll move forward and I'll take care of it, right? But I'll make you the boss and to the post questions and respond there, just like you discuss it in your physical class. Did you do this question? And what was your answer? What she said, do you really understand? Right? So those kind of things you talk in your physical classroom, right? So what I can suggest, you can still do that respectfully, right? Respect each other. When you're asking question, when you're responding your friends, don't forget to be respectful, right? So, okay, let me get to the attendance register. It's day 10. Well, this is day 10 in this class, and well, we had a merged class in other course, but anyways, Akashdeep,
Present, ma'am.
Amandeep, Amanveer Singh,
Present, ma'am.
Arjun,
Present, ma'am.
Arshdeep Singh,
Present, ma'am.
Gurinder Singh,
Present, ma'am.
Gurleen Kaur,
Present, ma'am.
Gurmanjot Singh,
Present, ma'am.
Harmeet Singh,
Present, ma'am.
Jaspal Singh, Jatanpreet Kaur, Jatanpreet Kaur, absent.
Yes, Jatanpreet Kaur present, ma'am.
Okay. Jurbanpreet Singh,
Present, ma'am.
Jurbanpreet Singh number 2.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Karanbir
Present,
Singh.
ma'am.
Present, ma'am.
Oh my God, it's fire
Yogapreet Singh
alarm.
present, ma'am.
Okay, but why did you turn on fire alarm? Karanbir Singh.
Present, ma'am.
Karanbir Singh.
He must be on fire, madam.
Present.
Kulvinder Singh.
Present, ma'am.
Love, Lovepreet
Ma'am, I
Kaur.
was cooking.
Present, ma'am.
Lovepreet Singh.
Present, ma'am.
Manisha.
Present, ma'am.
Manjot Kaur.
Present, ma'am.
Excuse me. Manjot Kaur number 2. Mahakdeep Kaur. Manjot
Present,
Kaur number
ma'am.
2. Manjot Kaur number 2. Mahakdeep Kaur.
Mahakdeep present.
Muskan.
Present, ma'am.
Neha.
Present, ma'am.
Parminder Kaur.
Present, ma'am.
Twinkle Jot Singh.
Present, ma'am.
Rajvinder Singh.
Present, ma'am. Present,
Robanpreet
ma'am.
Kaur. Robanpreet Kaur.
Present, ma'am.
Simarjeet Singh.
Present, ma'am.
Sukhmanpreet Kaur.
Present, ma'am.
Sukhpreet Kaur.
Present, ma'am.
Sumanpreet Kaur.
Present, ma'am.
Vanshika.
Present, ma'am.
Bhavesh.
Present, ma'am.
Manveer Singh. Sarvopari. Sarvopari.
Present, ma'am.
Ivjot Singh. Kapil.
Present, ma'am.
Devjot.
Present, ma'am.
Komalpreet.
Present, ma'am.
Navjot.
Present, ma'am.
Navjot. Navjot number 2.
Ma'am.
Navneet.
Present, ma'am.
Tushar.
Present,
Tushar.
ma'am.
Okay. Mohit.
Present, ma'am.
Sahil.
Present, ma'am.
Ranveer.
Present, ma'am.
Anu.
Present, ma'am.
Shahbaz.
Present, ma'am.
Shruti. Say, Monisha.
Present, ma'am.
Shruti is present.
Yes, ma'am.
What happened to your speaker?
Yes, ma'am. Shruti is present.
Okay. Shahina.
Present, ma'am.
Harjot.
Present, ma'am.
Karanbir.
Present, ma'am.
Kamarpal.
Yes, ma'am.
Vikrant.
Present, ma'am.
Okay. Anish. All done. All right. So check it at your side, please. Before you raise the concern, hey, you didn't mark me up there. I'm praising, I'm going to tell you tomorrow or maybe next week. But please check it today. I can wait for 1 more minute. All good?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I didn't miss you, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you for joining me today. Hopefully this session is useful for everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
See,
It's very
see you
useful.
in next.
Thank
See
you,
you next.
ma'am.
See you in
Thank you.
next section. Take care.
Have a wonderful weekend, madam.
Thank you, ma'am.
You too. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, ma'am.